Good morning, noon, and afternoon to everyone joining us. My name is Winston Thomas, Editor-in-Chief for CDOTrends, and I will be moderating this discussion, which is our third installment of the Pure Leadership series. Today, for the next 50 minutes or so, we'll be talking about everyone's favorite subject, TCO. The topic we are really going to be discussing about is TCO beyond the numbers, what they never told you about all-flash storage. The idea is that TCO, or total cost of ownership, is often used to determine the value of a technology like flash storage. Nothing wrong with this measure, and is often used with other measures to make or influence purchase decisions for storage. However, our argument today is not that TCO is bad at all. Instead, we believe that it does not capture the full picture, value, or potential of all-flash storage. And while capturing all aspects may not matter too much in the past, it does today. Why? We have security, sustainability, and now the incoming issues surrounding generative AI. Today, to discuss and maybe disagree my points, we have Mark Jobbins, Vice President and Field CTO for APJ at Pure Storage. Joining him, and I know I'm not going to do justice to his name, Roman Gagliardi, Head of CIO CTO Advisory Services at Wavestone Asia. Roman, I hope I did get your name correctly.
Nailed it, Winston.
But before we move forward, I would like to highlight some housekeeping rules. First and most importantly, please do participate in this discussion. This discussion is not just a Q&A discussion among a close group of panelists. We want you to participate. So freely do look for questions, send in comments, or if you want, you can even highlight topics that you wanted to discuss. And to do that, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A button, not the chat button, which is we are using it for our own private communication. So please do use the Q&A button. And at the end, do look out for the QR code, because at the end, we do want to hear from you how we have performed, and so that we can tailor our discussions in the future that can meet your expectations. Now, right, let's start with the discussion proper, and maybe with the first gentle question. The question is, does TCO give you the complete picture when purchasing IT, not just storage? And maybe I'd like to bring in Roman into this discussion. Roman, what do you think?
Sure. So for many, many years, TCO was used in order to provide the good picture of what the IT would bring as a value for the CFO. So from a cost standpoint. And now on the digitalization journey, what we can see is that the customer is changing. It's not only the CFO, it could be the sales representative, it could be directly the CTO, for instance. And so I think the very center of what we need and what we expect from an IT standpoint will also relate to value. And so it could be value in terms of lead time between an ID and what I need from an IT services that could accelerate to have the better time to market or time to deliver a new product. It could be also the lead time to value. So the lead time to value is that I have an IT services ready, but is it really ready for the business or ready for the IT user or my consumers? And finally, we can have a look also from a CSR standpoint. Does it match, or is it aligned on what I want to do as a corporate regarding environment? So now we can see that TCO is not answering completely to that kind of request. And I think it's important to have it in mind when we want to consider any new purchasing of IT service or IT product. What do you think, Marco, about that?
Yeah, look, I totally agree with what you're saying there. I think there's a couple of little twists to that, or a couple of things I'd like to sort of add, to that. Because, I think for many years, obviously that sort of baseline, just financial analysis piece was there. But you pointed out some key things at the moment. If you think about it, the world that we're living in at the moment is just rapidly sort of growing and developing from a services perspective. So therefore, organizations really need to be thinking very much around, as you said, that time to value. And I think the challenge is that pace is just accelerating so much that now, it's almost impossible for organizations to have outages or changes. And organizations that do suffer from that situation are probably going to get left behind. And I know that's perhaps a little bit of a controversial statement to make, but, look, I have a teenage daughter. I love her to death, but she's got an attention span that's very short. And if there's a service outage to any of the applications that she's using, she's immediately looking at alternates. And we're now living in a world where, that cost of change between service providers is actually reducing. So I think organizations need to be, accelerating faster to respond to the customer needs, as you pointed out, and be continually developing and taking advantage of the different technologies that are out there. And the ones that can grapple with that and actually sort of harness that, I think, are the ones that we're seeing are thriving in today's environment. The ones that are not are the ones that are falling behind and, possibly have got a limited lifespan out there. And look, I've said it a couple of times before in some of the presentations I do, there's always going to be a little boutique niche organization or product that can get away with it. But the vast majority of organizations have to, respond and be available and really providing that great experience online. So wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think it's just interesting how, things are developing, people are looking at it with a slightly different lens.
Roman, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to complete because it rings some bell to me, because aside of this KPI and fancy number that we can share regarding this time to market and to be competitive, to be the best competitor on the market, I think also, and what I have seen with several customers, is also the consideration of is the IT product compliant to the different countries on which I want to deliver it. And so I think it can also imply to storage or any other tech layer for an organization. And in my opinion, I think it's something totally different compared to one TCO number or any other KPI that we need to have in mind in the organization while purchasing new IT services. And I feel that in something that I say, when I advise my customer have the tendency to avoid it or to not think about it, and it will add some lead time regarding their project, their initiative, or the life cycle of their product. I don't know if it's something that you have seen within your activity, but for me, it's like my bread and butter on a daily basis.
Thanks, Roman. Diving down to not just IT, but into storage itself, could you, when people look at storage TCO, what are the things what are they using to calculate the TCO in the first place? And what other measures are they using to make a decision on storage? Maybe Mark, since you're meeting with a lot of clients and customers, what are they putting in terms of numbers in front of you when they make a judgment call?
Yeah, look, again, there is this sort of focus, and I think it's changing a little bit from, I'll say, those traditional sort of metrics where, we think about, other sort of features that come in or areas. And I think the three sort of core areas, and Roman did touch on some of these, one is the cost of operationally running things. And there's a big focus. I mean, look, everybody's always thought about the cost, the operational cost, but there's a view from a sustainability perspective that's becoming more front of mind. So if we look at it, I think I saw some stats that are saying, it's about 1% of all global electricity or power generation goes to running data centers. I've seen some other stats that puts that a little bit higher. So let's say, it's somewhere in the 1 to 2%, but it's about 2% of all CO2 emissions that are generated from that as well. So that's significant. So I think as organizations are getting more conscious around that social responsibility, people are thinking about that. What's the impact of the infrastructure that they're running? It ties in again to another comment we had earlier, which, if we think about it, we're in this world now where, look, generative AI is one of the hot topics, to say the least, at the moment. And, pretty well every organization that I speak to is experimenting in this area. I think people are still grappling with what will it actually do? How can it actually really help? And how do we put the guidelines around it? But the thing that it is doing is actually driving a huge strain on all infrastructure, not just storage, but compute, network, the whole data center piece. So people are starting to look and go, can they be smarter in the technologies they're deploying? So they want to use technologies that are using less power, less cooling, perhaps actually taking less space within data centers. Because what I'm hearing and seeing is, in certain regions, there are constraints on, can a data center be expanded? So people are looking at, can we leverage existing data center space and can we optimize it? So I think actually in Singapore, there's a moratorium there that's actually increased the running temperature within data centers. So it's popped it up into the mid-20s. I think it's 26.4 degrees, which is significantly higher than traditionally data centers would have been run. But it has a huge positive impact in reducing the amount of power and cooling that's needed. But you've then got to have technology that is not adding and pushing those limits any further. You want to be looking to reduce that. So I think that's one. Sorry, you got me on one of my topics that I love very much. With this, the other one is that speed to market means that people have to have technologies that can be upgraded non-destructively. You can't have these big outages and these complex forklift upgrades. People want to be able to get the latest innovations continually and online. So I think that's another thing that people are really thinking about. And then the final piece is that cyber protection side of things. I know I've covered three very broad topics, but I'll link it back to the total cost of ownership. If you were just looking at that initial purchase price and writing it off over a period of time, all that kind of stuff, you're not actually thinking about some of those impacts. Can you use that technology to accelerate new services to market? Can you actually avoid outages? And I'll say scheduled outages, you might possibly be able to manage it. But if we think of it from a cyber attack, and look, I'm based in Australia. We've literally just had a couple of very high profile, cyber incidents within the Australian market. There are businesses there that are struggling to come back in time and regain confidence from their consumers. So there's a cost associated with that, and that probably significantly far outweighs the cost of that initial purchase. So I think some of those areas should be factored into today's landscape and how you think of that total cost of ownership. I'm not sure. What do you think about that, Roman? Is it sort of, are you hearing that as well? Or?
In a sense, for data center, I totally agree. I think it's important to bring in also everything on cloud now, in terms of considering like the acceleration and opportunity to scale fastly using cloud services. And it will bring for me two extra topics on here to discuss. The first one is everything related to software development and the modularity that will require to bring speed. So modularity in terms of microservices, container, infrastructure as code, and the way to embed the storage requests automatically in order to bring speed. And the second one is the way to monitor your cost. And regarding the cost monitoring here, but it's obviously related to the FinOps methodology in order to understand your cost in the cloud, in order to avoid to have big discrepancies that you cannot understand because you have bad habits of using your cloud services like you have done in the past using your data center, meaning leaving everything switch on all of the time, 24/7, but then you will add a 2 or 3 0 to your bill. It's not what you want. And here, so it's I think there is a big change management to be handled in order to adapt and change the way to calculate the TCO based on this modularity required, and based also of the new usage induced by the cloud, like pay-per-use, etc.
And Roman, you mentioned that there needs a different way to actually calculate TCO, looking at the aspects that you brought about. Is this happening at the moment? Are people struggling? Is there a resistance to how you need to shift the frame on how you calculate TCOs?
So I will give you a consultant answer. It depends. It depends on the maturity of our customer IT controlling department, depending on the processes put in place, on the tooling that they are using that will bring some features to handle the new concept and this granularity and the new technical enablers in place in the IT department. And finally, also from an organization and human standpoint, I don't see a resistance. It's much more time allocation and priority. What I have seen in the APAC market, and feel free to challenge me if you disagree, Mark, but cloud transformation is already happening, and we are pretty far in the cloud transformation. What I see now is much more data platform transformation in order to adapt the way of providing and consuming data within the company and for consumers, and everything related to middleware transformation, API management, etc., in order to enhance this opening of your IS system to other company or to consumer, to bring value, to bring new services, to bring extra competitivity on the market for your company.
Okay. Mark, do you agree? Challenge?
Yeah, look, I would challenge some of that. And the only bit that I would sort of challenge on this is there's no question that from essentially the cloud era, everybody is bought into that concept of, consumption-based services, the ability to scale and everything. The bit that I would probably challenge out there is there are so many organizations that have done very simple lift and shift of their previous infrastructure into cloud services, and I think they've then got the sticker shock around the cost of that. There's no optimization around that. So I agree people are on that journey, but what I'm actually seeing is perhaps a little bit more of a balance where people want to get all of those cloud-like services, but are perhaps a little bit more thoughtful in what will run in public cloud versus perhaps a private cloud on premise or a private cloud. And that hybrid, I guess the rise of the hybrid cloud, which is no surprise to anybody on this call, I don't think, is definitely occurring. But I am seeing people looking to repatriate some workloads and some data from hyperscalers, particularly if it's a very predictable workload or there's performance issues, or the other topic that seems to be getting a lot of focus at the moment is data sovereignty. So people are getting very anxious. Well, sorry, a number of organizations are getting anxious about where does their data live. And I think we touched on that a little bit earlier around perhaps those data privacy side of things, making sure you understand that. So I actually look and go, I think it's a healthier position now that people almost like want the good bits from cloud services, but they're becoming far more balanced in where that workload is. So I think the contentious piece I'm going here is I don't think people are as far on that journey as people think. In some respects, they did a quick and easy jump, and now a bit of sanity is coming into that decision with it. It's just what I'm seeing a little bit more.
Now, on that part, I can complete what I had in mind. So regarding far, meaning that I agree with you, and there is a big lift and shift into IaaS services, and there is no optimization or low optimization that has been done in terms of replatforming and also like FinOps basics methodology, at least switch off services by night or bringing monolithic application toward microservices, that will help at least to have this granularity of selection. So on that part, you're right. I agree with you. Regarding the other like inducer of transformation, it's the compliance data protection part. I think China is a good example for that. And also like the cloud tenant location is highly important in order to be compliant to that kind of request.
Excellent point. Thanks. I just wanted to just slightly look at what Marcus mentioned in terms of how important it is to look at storage and look at the other issues like sustainability and not just fixated on the numbers. But my question to both of you is, has that shifted the conversation on hardware? Because the reason is, in the olden days, people tend to look at the applications and then they look at what kind of hardware they need. And that's the progression from one to the other. But now with security and now the stress AI has on storage, and as mentioned, you have privacy issues coming out and optimization and sustainability. All of those are coming up now. Has that shifted the conversation the other way around? Do you see companies looking at, hey, what is the hardware that I have and what do I do to support my, how do I upgrade it in a sense that I can future-proof my software development in some sense? Do you see that happening? Do you see a mix? Do you see people thinking? Maybe Mark, you can start because you're looking at clients as well.
Yeah, look, definitely. I think that, there was a phase where people were very focused on the software layer and, that the rise of the microservices, container world, and the Kubernetes environments to give agility. People have been focused on that, but the workloads are changing a little bit where the data is becoming more important and scaling to large, large volume. So I think in some respects, there's a little bit of a flip in a different direction, looking at a hardware infrastructure perspective. Both compute, if you think about it from a AI perspective, there's a view of really moving to GPUs, that whole side of things. But from a data storage perspective, there's this focus that, I guess people looked to flash technology perhaps for some performance benefits originally. But now what I'm seeing is people are very conscious that traditional mechanical disk, it consumes a lot of space in data centers. So it goes back to my comment before, consumes a huge amount of power, needs a lot of cooling, and fundamentally is not that reliable. So, mechanical disk tends to hit a reliability issue around that 5-year mark. There's a few issues before that, and at 5 years, I shouldn't say it falls off a cliff, but the rate of failure increases. So people have actually started to see that now flash has been, mainstream for, a number of years, that we're actually seeing it uses a lot less power because there's far less moving parts. In fact, there's only the fan cooling it. The reliability in certain areas is significantly higher and the cooling requirements are lower as well. So people are now going, okay, I can do that. You tend to get, particularly, what I see is you can get consistent performance with different workloads on flash technology as well. So people are able to perhaps consolidate workloads and allow them to share data between applications easier or move data between applications far easier. But I think one of the other technologies that's come out, recently is the leveraging of QLC-based NAND. So that's like quad level. So the higher density flash has suddenly meant that, pretty well all areas of data management are open for storage. And look, Pure's been pioneering that side of things. We recently announced 75 terabyte, what we call direct flash modules, which are our flash drives, that have suddenly meant that you can get petabytes of storage in a very small footprint. In fact, we're looking at 4 petabytes of storage in about 12 RU of file and object storage, which changes the dynamics. So suddenly people are able to look at and go, all of that data that we've held on mechanical disk from a cost perspective, we can now bring that into a flash-based platform. We can get the benefits from, higher performance, more consistent performance, but probably most importantly, the cost of management of that actually significantly drops. The reliability is probably 10x better, so you've got less components failing, definitely helping from a data center perspective, from a data density within rack space, lower power and cooling as well. And, you know, we've got some customers that are reducing their power consumption from a data perspective up to 96%. Let's just say 90%. It's significant. You can't ignore it, especially when the cost of power is also significantly increasing as well. So I do think there's a bit of a focus there. And it's a little bit of a swing around going, okay, if we now live in a world where we have to have these huge volumes of data, we need to have faster compute layers, and we need the ability to share this data between different applications. The traditional models won't stand up to that. They'll simply break. So you've got to think differently. And, you know, I believe from a data management perspective, Flash provides significant benefits for customers.
Especially when you have companies like countries like Singapore, where they're putting a limit on how much power you can draw in data centers, right? So people have to think. Roman, sorry to come in.
I wanted to complete because it's what we can see here on the APAC market, and I think Mark, there is one other topic that you don't mention but be hidden in your what you just disclaimed is the obsolescence management. I see a very bad maturity in terms of obsolescence management in my customer here in Asia, because it's like when you have some budget to spend, then you do obsolescence management, you know. And so here I think that based on the big rationalization that you can provide with that kind of new tech hardware, then it will ease the way to do obsolescence management, then to reduce the threats through cybersecurity because you have end of life, end of support, and also bad that like a business continuity for the business. So here I think it's a very good improvement in terms of value that it's happening right now. And linked to your comment regarding data management, so it's linked to what I say to the market. So now we have the tech enabler from an hardware standpoint. Now the transformation will be around data platform, APIization of the different application in order to make it less physical in terms of interconnection. If I use a geek word, layer 7, let's say, to interconnect two worlds, so cloud and legacy on-prem system. And I have that customer is really wondering that if is it better to interconnect physically my two worlds, or do I need to interoperate? What is the cost? What are the IT hardware that I need to require to implement? And what are the lead time in between the two scenarios? So I think we are at the edge of like a new era that is accelerating, at least, to provide this new tech IT hardware.
Look, it's a key one that you just raised there. That tech debt is huge, and you know I think a lot of organizations are really grappling with that. You know, that whole holy dooly. The world is moving fast. I need to almost over provision when I first purchase equipment, praying that I've got it right for the future. And then things move so fast that suddenly you've got a huge project to potentially, you know, bring that technology up to the next generation. And look, that's one of those ones, you know, we talk about TCO, but people don't necessarily think about that. How you get painted into a corner and you can't get out of it. And that's another one of those ones that's perhaps not on the first page of the Excel spreadsheet when you're doing your TCO. It's really, you know, down the track when suddenly people are going, oh, I'm really stuck now. And I think, you know, we've touched on this a couple of times. You know, you've raised that point, that agility and the ability to respond quickly, it's not slowing down. It's only getting faster. And I think it's becoming more complex with the scale that people are working with now. So, you know, I guess thinking about that tech debt piece becomes more important. So it is key. And I think the expectation is now being set where you can have those non-disruptive changes, those non-disruptive upgrades through technology generations, platforms that are there, that's becoming the acceptable norm. That's what people want. You just can't move away from that view to it. So I think people need to definitely be conscious of that, because the cost can be huge if you don't get that right. The other one I would like to sort of circle back on as well, I touched on it before. I think we both again touched on this. We're pretty well in sync on most of these things, so there's not much contention, I think. But the cyber security side of things as well, traditionally that cyber piece has been, defense in depth, the network, it's the points of access and things like that. But what we're seeing is, really having a final line of defense, is important to be able to get back. So look, I've been in the industry 30 plus years, and I started, in infrastructure and doing backups, and, you do a backup, you try and desperately cram it into that little window that you got, you pray that you can finish it in time. And probably most importantly, you were always hoping you never, ever needed to restore, because it was going to be fraught with danger, to say the least. Flash technology has changed that. So the ability to use, snapshot technology to help you get back. But Pure's actually pushed that boundary a little bit more. So we can have multiple snapshots, but we can have immutable snapshots that are also not visible to anybody that gets into your system. So it's like a final line of defense that you can have copies of your data that cannot be deleted. And we've seen that customers are now going, I need that as a final level of defense and a final level of insurance to get systems back. And I see, we've certainly seen it from, some of our customers have been able to leverage that. I saw actually there was a service provider, sorry, public domain. There's a service provider in Denmark that was hit from a ransomware perspective. They were unable to get back. So it's something like, hundreds of customers that have been impacted and put out of business. So that's not acceptable. And you think of the cost associated with that, that's a business gone from the service provider, let alone all of the customers that are running there. So I think, without trying to make the conversation overly complex, but these are things that people have to think about. Because unfortunately, I think we're now in a world of, it's not a case of if you're going to get attacked from a cyber perspective, it's a case of when. And can you respond? And can you be back up and running with valid data that's unchanged? That's a huge thing. That's you're in the game and you're back, or you're not, as far as I can see.
Roman, I'm going to ask you on that in terms of, you mentioned that people avoid technical or technology obsolescence or technical debt in a conversation. But before that, I just wanted to also highlight to those people who are in or watching this, please do send in your questions. I already see one good question out there, which I will be asking, but please do send in the questions, or even send in comments or remarks, which we will follow up with our own questions and keep the discussion going. Please be part of this discussion. Roman, back to you. Why do people avoid? Because it is a big issue. And Mark also pointed out, for instance, cybersecurity, nowadays it's not about if, but it's a when issue. But yet people talk about this, they pay a lot of lip service, but when it comes to calculating and buying, purchasing, all that is a secondary discussion. Is this a mindset issue, or is it how organizations look at technology as a pure purchasing practice? And not future-proofing practice? What's going on there?
So I would take this example of a big pharmaceutical company. Okay, they have multiple chemical sites, so industrial sites, on which they have like multiple hardware to support IoT, to support their computers, the network, etc. SCADA LAN, and every machine engines that are there. After several years, so everything is paid, total cost of ownership is done. However, they don't change the hardware. So I've done several audits, which we have tried to see how to avoid cybersecurity risk and obsolescence management, and try to provide new enablers for the business. And the answer wasn't that they don't want to change. they are afraid to change. Because when you do have like an industrial site which is working, and when you have like a big churn or turnover in terms of head of people within the sites, they do not know anymore how it works. And come back to Mark's story about backup. You're afraid to change something that is running, and you don't know what you don't know. So if I change a piece, a switch, a part of my SCADA LAN, and I change it to something more recent, would I jeopardize my own activity? Should I be proactive or reactive? And so that kind of consideration is what is like restraining that kind of industry of changing what they have on site. So what cybersecurity can do on that? They patch it up like a fortress, like a bastion. So everything in is like bit garbage, everything out is protected. So you don't have a way in, so it's protected from the out to in. But inside, if you have managed to go in the network, it's flat, and you can take advantage of any like failure or bad code exposure because it's badly protected.
Okay. Good point. I just wanted to also bring out the question that one of our audience asked in terms of attitude to doing bespoke developments instead of more standardized modular solutions. Has there been a change especially in regards to how we are discussing about TCO and what are the considerations? Maybe Romain, you can sort of take this.
So I think in order to have like a better management in terms of TCO, I think it's when we must introduce granularity. Okay, so back in the 90s and the 2000s, usually we have like one service equal one TCO. Now it's a bit more complex, and we have the trend to verticalize the TCO of an application that is relying on the CI/CD pipeline, that is relying on an infrastructure platform, handling everything. So now we need to have the availability of our different services within the organization to provide that piece of service provided to the upper layer up to the business. So like this, we can organize some cluster of application, relying on some cluster of middleware and software development lifecycle, relying on some cluster of infrastructure, hosting, the storage, network, etc. So in that way, I think it's linked to what I mentioned earlier. It's linked also to the IT controlling maturity. And that's why this IT controlling maturity and mentality shift need to be supported, because it's a total new model that is induced by the new technology, the hardware, the new architecture of developing application. It's not a monolithic anymore. It could be microservices that are piece of code that you will push through a pipeline of continuous integration, continuous development. And that kind of methodology and way of thinking, it's not their job. It's not the IT controlling job. So you need to support them in order to do the bridges between the tech guys, the dev, the ops, and the control guy, in order to make them understand the concept and pushing a framework, processes to control the cost, and same objective, providing the keys to analyze from an architecture standpoint or from a tech standpoint, in order to give the key to the controlling to say, okay, this bucket is very expensive. What are the options?
Okay, good point. There's another question down there in terms of, and essentially it says how in a hybrid DC point of view, or even a hybrid cloud point of view, how storage can be made more secure and more cost effective. Maybe Mark, that is like a question made for you. And maybe you can also introduce and highlight to the audience some of the new announcements that you have made in terms of trying to keep the cost down. But over to you, Mark, on that one.
Okay. Yeah, look, thanks for that. Look, some of the areas that you need to focus on, and certainly, areas that Pure is, looked at is, from a cost-effective perspective, look, the flash technology allows us to do data reduction. So we can look at, deduplication and things like that to reduce the amount of physical storage that's needed to store data. And we're incredibly effective at that. And that really should be, table stakes for getting in there. You need to be effective in that. But if we look at it and then go, some of the hyperscalers, they haven't necessarily looked at that so much. So Pure's tackled that. Our operating system, our Purity operating system, as we call it, that runs on our storage appliances, runs in AWS and Azure as well. Same data management services. And that's really what you want as a customer. You can run the same data services, which means you get the data reduction rates, which is great. You get the ability to replicate data synchronously or asynchronously. So that's another way to protect your data. You can take snapshots of data. But the one that's really, really important for customers was the view that it may not be an external actor that gets into your system. It may actually be an internal threat that you have. So if you take snapshots, they can't be changed, but they could be deleted by an internal person. So we changed that and we created something called safe mode, which means that those snapshots cannot be deleted by somebody that takes control of the appliance. If you think about that, what that actually then means is you've got an immutable snapshot that you can come back to. So that becomes absolutely critical for a customer. So I think that all falls into this strategy that people need to take. But having the flash technology with snapshots means you can then present multiple copies of that data back to your forensics teams. So they can actually then go, yeah, that bit of data is okay, that bit of data is not. So you can actually then come back far quicker on that one. If we wrap that around two other little things, and you sort of teased me there, Winston, on this one, part of our management platform actually essentially analyzes your environment. So it looks for what normal operations are, and we have something called anomaly detection. So our AI platform, it looks and goes, hey, if you've been operating in this sort of profile, if there's suddenly a change, might be a large amount of read of data, then a rewriting it with a change in the data reduction rate, I reckon that's probably going to be a cyber attack. Somebody's encrypted your data. The platform will proactively tell you about that. So you can actually get to a point, about that a little bit more, but also then gives you a point in time to start the recovery, which is possibly, one of the other challenges. When do you start the recovery point? So those are some of the smarts using AI and those technologies to get you back. And we're so confident around that, what you were mentioning there, Winston, was you can consume Pure Storage as a service, where you literally just buy a consumption-based model. We announced some additional service levels around that. So we have the typical ones around availability, 6 nines of availability, performance profiles. We say, we'll guarantee no disruptive upgrades. But we've also offered to customers a ransomware recovery service as well, which will guarantee we can get your data back because we take those immutable snapshots. We'll even give you another array to come back on and actually do the restoration. So we're actually trying to de-risk the environment and actually give customers options on that. You can only do that with flash technology and the flash technology from Pure to get those levels of reliability and service on it. So I promise I didn't see that question, but it was a great question. I think it's front of mind for some customers. I mean, everybody's nervous about this situation where how do I protect my data? How do I protect my reputation in the market? And how do I stay in business? So yeah, people are very much thinking about this cyber protection side of things.
Thanks, Mark. And to the audience, please do send in more questions if you have. We have like around 5 to 6 minutes to actually do this discussion, and then we'll wrap it up. Roman, for the last few minutes, I wanted to talk about sustainability, which is the thread that links through the entire discussion that we have had so far for the last 48 minutes. The thing is, with sustainability, people say that quite easily that we have to be talking about sustainability. And there is Remit coming down saying that IT directors need to look at sustainability. But to what extent does this matter when you do TCO calculation? Is the discussion front and center, or is it like something that they do the initial purchase and then we look at sustainability? How's that discussion going or evolving?
To keep it short on this one, I think it's a long journey and we are only at the beginning. The mentality start to change when it's very slow. Okay, it's good to think about CSR, and the CSR within corporate are trying to push their new KPI or new guidelines for the different directions. However, it takes time, and if we need to cut something, it's something that will be cut. However, based on that, we can see that there are some dependency between TCO, FinOps methodology, and sustainability. Now, for instance, when the advisory company like Weston are delivering like FinOps project in order to enhance the TCO of the different services or application, etc., we are considering the sustainability as part of the different criteria in order to not only say it's a sustainability project, it's something embedded that will provide value because, like Mark mentioned, in terms of energy consumption, we will decrease it, cooling consumption will decrease it, and decreasing a main cost inducer will decrease the total cost of ownership. Then there is some processes that also are put in place in terms of RFP. So meaning that we are also forcing our managing service partner or any vendors, infrastructure vendors, software vendors to put some answers regarding sustainability. And it is like, it starts to become a key criteria of a decision as part of the aspect to be considered in the selection of the right partner.
Interesting point. Mark, do you see that in a lot of your RFPs, or when it comes to proposals, that sustainability or sustainability measures are coming into place?
Again, I'd sort of say, yes, it's evolving and growing. So we're certainly seeing, in RFP responses, certain organizations are asking, what are your credentials? So it is becoming part of their selection criteria. But I think there's a couple of other things that add to it. I go, the sustainability piece, you actually want to reduce the amount of power that you're using because the cost of power, so there's actually a cost associated with it directly that if you can maintain or reduce it becomes, a direct positive impact for you. But what I'm also seeing is there's the constraints that in certain countries, you're constrained as to what you can do with your data centers. So you've got to get smarter. And then the next piece that I'm seeing, certainly here in Australia, there's now mandatory reporting for certain organizations around their sustainability activities. It's in its infancy, as Roman said, but it's building. And I think this will all link to a point where, there's some financial benefits, but the social responsibility side of things, I think ultimately consumers will start to make decisions on which organizations they want to either work with or buy from. I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow, but again, I go back to my daughter. She's of a generation where she's trying to make informed decisions around which organizations she wants to I guess, purchase things from or work with. I know it's always difficult to get to that point, but I think the questions will be asked more. So organizations will need to actually take this more seriously and have an opportunity that if they're actually leading, reducing, their footprint on the planet, doing better social responsibility, I think, there's a generation of consumers that will start to actually just move towards them. And that's their opportunity to actually take, I guess, thought leadership in those areas. So it's an area that's dear to my heart as well. So I think we should be doing better things around sustainability because it's just the right thing to do. But I think ultimately we'll get driven from the cost for not doing the right thing will be too high. And then you're actually going to get consumers that will move it. So, and then you've got the mandatory reporting that's coming from certain, governments as well. So I think the days where people can park it to one side and say, yeah, I planted 2 trees and life's good, has actually changed, where people are now getting far more serious. And I think that's a great thing. And, I think that's where, the 2 organizations here can help. people make those decisions and get on that journey.
Do you see AI actually shifting that? Because when we talk about AI, we're talking about density. But when you look at density, we're also looking at actually physical load in a data center and space considerations. Yes, I saw that, Mark. Physical and data considerations. So I'm just wondering, is that shifting the conversation?
People are definitely conscious of it. So you think about it, if you want to leverage AI, you need potentially large volumes of data. You need to be able to store that. So you've got to think about that, how that piece fits in. So people are definitely becoming more conscious of it. It's got to be front of mind. You've got to do things smarter. So being able to store data more effectively and reduce the load there is important, because I think at the moment we're seeing the load on the compute side of things is significantly increasing. So people need to get the balance as to where can we sustain this. And the great thing is, actually, on the data side of things, you can make some significant improvements, to say the least.
Roman, what were your thoughts as well?
I will extend your question regarding AI also on automation, okay? Because AI is already advanced, like knowledge management and also maturity within the organization. But I think like first step is automation. So you have like everything related to RPA, robot process automation, that you can put in place in some part of your data center, for instance, or part of your digital workplace services. And it's something is happening right now, which that we can see that our customers are trying to automate like basic action that a technician can do in order to make it faster, easily to understand, and increase the time to market for the different services. Then regarding AI, I think that the most use case that I can see as of now are related to service desk in order to catch and dispatch properly any IT or consumer request in order to dispatch it to the proper team and to enhance and optimize the efficiency of the different team. And finally, the main use case also that I can see regarding AI are regarding infrastructure as code in order to like automate and propose dedicated services to your developers team to accelerate the rate and efficiency of development from a cyber but also development standpoint.
I think the other one there, if I could just do one, is actually visibility. So I think one of the challenges that some organizations, we did a study, Pure did a study with the University of Technology in Sydney, where they actually polled a number of sustainability managers, and what they found was there was an overwhelming agreement that IT can form an important part to reduce their footprint, but the challenge that she found was the visibility and actually getting data to make informed decisions around what was their impact within the data center. So I'm doing a long answer to this one, but I think actually using AI and smarts to get visibility means people can make better and informed decisions around what impact their technology is having. And perhaps that means moving certain workloads to different locations, or certainly having the data points for that. So yeah, that's what I'm also saying.
Thank you. I think we are reaching our time limit. I think we feel like we just started this discussion on TCO, and it's going to go on for quite some time. But and to those people who still have questions on board, don't worry, we will still look to answer them either offline or to reach out to you. But before I let you guys leave, I'd just like to have like one question. Since we started this on storage TCO, what advice would you give a decision maker now when looking at TCO calculation to improve on it or to expand on it or to ensure that they're actually getting time to value, as Roman, you mentioned? Roman, maybe you can give that advice.
Okay, so what I can give you as an advice is TCO is not only a KPI, okay? It's much more than that. That should be put into consideration to your business priority. We are not doing IT for IT. It's better when it's IT for business, and it means something for the business and for the C-suite. And then regarding the TCO, there is your current TCO, but maybe it's not the right one. So it's linked to what I just mentioned. It's a matter of maturity of your IT controlling process that should be taken a step back on it and think, do I do it the right way, or should I evolve based on the new technology enablers and the trend on the market?
Roman, just wanted to just expand on what you mentioned, and based on the question that is on screen now, do you think we are talking about IT decision makers? Do you think it should be all business decision makers having this expanded view of what TCO actually gives? Because you can say all you want, but if the CFO is controlling the budget and they feel that it's not meeting their KPIs, they're not going to give it to you.
So it's linked to the Agile and DevOps methodology. When you are a CIO and you need to support your business will be interested for sure regarding the cost part. Okay, don't take me wrong, but they would be very interested also on your time to market to produce their new application, their new project to support the competitivity on the market. They will be interested on time to deliver. So as soon as the MVP is done, how you can support them in order to bring new features, new user experience on their application. And finally, are you able to support them if there are any bugs, failure? And I'm not talking about cybersecurity. I'm not only talking like I click on the button, shut down because I don't know. So it's what we call as a last KPI, which is the mean time to recover. So do I have the right technology that provide all of this for the fair price?
Thank you. And Mark, your advice, your parting advice.
My parting advice. Look, I think you've got to go beyond those raw numbers. I think you've got to think to the future. What is the impact of a potential outage, of that tech debt, of cyber threat? These have got to be factored in to actually think about how to keep your business running. I think it's just a very different world that we're now living in, and then tying into that sustainability piece. So I go back, and I think it is just beyond those raw numbers, and you've got to be looking to the future and making sure you don't get painted into a corner.
Thank you, guys. It was a lively discussion, and really appreciate the insights. As I said earlier, please use this as a starting point. Please continue the discussion with Mark or Romain offline or beyond this event itself. Other than that, thank you. And I have a QR code that, again, I'd like you all to look at. Yes. So this QR code, please, it's very important for us. Please do scan it and do answer the short survey. It's a very short survey, I've been told. And we really like to hear from you and to understand where you're coming from, as well as to make sure that we can tailor our next events for you. Again, this is the third installment. There will be another fourth installment coming up, which we will be sharing more information of. But till then, on behalf of Pure CDOTrends and for our guests from Wavestone Asia, thank you and have a good afternoon.